The 2025-2026 Champions League group stage delivered a message that European football has been slowly writing for years, but this season it was impossible to ignore. Reputation alone is no longer enough. Big names felt real pressure. Traditional giants were forced into survival mode. Meanwhile, teams once dismissed as outsiders arrived with structure, courage, and a clear plan. The group stage did not reward history, it rewarded preparation. From the very first match day, this Champions League felt different. Every game carried the weight of a final, every mistake carried a cost, and every team, no matter how big or small, entered the competition knowing that comfort no longer existed. This was not a group stage designed to warm teams up. This was a filter, a competition with no safe zones. One of the clearest realities of this group stage was how little margin for error existed. A single lapse of concentration, one missed defensive rotation, one poor decision in midfield, one failed clearance was often enough to decide matches. Teams did not have the luxury of growing into games. The Champions League demanded immediate clarity. In previous seasons, elite clubs could absorb poor performances and still recover comfortably. This time, recovery was not guaranteed. Points dropped early created pressure late, and pressure in Europe exposes everything. The rise of the giant killers. Another defining theme of the group stage was the emergence of so-called smaller teams as genuine threats. These teams did not arrive to admire stadiums or exchange shirts. They arrived with high pressing structures, compact defensive blocks, and ruthless transitional attacks. They understood their limits and weaponized them. Rather than chasing possession, they chased moments. Rather than fearing big names, they targeted weaknesses. And time after time, those weaknesses appeared. Big teams were forced to defend deeper than expected. They were rushed into errors. They were dragged into physical battles they didn't always want. This was not luck. This was organization beating reputation. Travel, fatigue, and the price of the calendar. The congested schedule played a critical role in shaping the group stage. Long travel distances, compressed match days, and relentless domestic commitments tested squad depth like never before. Even elite teams felt the strain. Rotation became unavoidable, and for teams without depth, the consequences were immediate. Fatigue didn't just affect legs, it affected decisions. Pressing triggers were mistimed, defensive lines dropped too early, midfields lost control under pressure. The Champions League didn't care why teams struggled, it only recorded results. Tactics over talent. Perhaps the most important lesson of the group stage was this: systems mattered more than superstars. Managers who embraced compact, low blocks, fast transitions, and intelligent possession found success even without world-famous names. Meanwhile, teams relying heavily on individual brilliance were repeatedly exposed. Tactical clarity became the difference between survival and elimination. Teams that knew exactly who they were and how they wanted to play progressed. Teams that relied on identity without structure struggled. The Champions League punished improvisation. It rewarded discipline, a true test of readiness. By the end of the group stage, the competition had already done its job. It separated the prepared from the hopeful, the organized from the nostalgic. Those who adapted survived. Those who relied on history suffered. And that is where the real Champions League story began. Every match felt like a final. As the final match day arrived, the tension was unmistakable. Every team playing on the final night had a clear objective. There were no meaningless games. Every fixture carried consequences. Every goal changed the table. All 36 teams entered the competition with ambition. All believed they had a path, but by the end, only 8 teams qualified directly for the round of 16. 16 teams were forced into the playoffs. Teams finishing 26th and below were sent home. There was no safety net. Before kickoff, almost every team was still mathematically at risk. The margins were brutal. In many cases, teams were separated by a single point, a single goal difference, or a single moment. Only 2 teams entered the final match day already secure in their qualification: Arsenal and Bayern Munich. Everyone else had to fight. A night of pressure and collision. The final round of matches was played at maximum intensity. This was football played on a knife's edge. The most dramatic fixture of the night came in the form of Chelsea versus Napoli. Chelsea needed to win, not just to qualify, but to push into the top 8. With multiple teams separated by a single point, anything less than victory would likely send them into the playoffs or worse. Napoli, on the other hand, sat in 25th position. For them, them, defeat meant elimination. Victory was the only path to survival. This was not just a football match. This was existential. Chelsea versus Napoli, a match under siege. The pressure surrounding the match was intense long before kickoff. Chelsea supporters felt it deeply. Tension spilled beyond the pitch. Disturbingly, 2 Chelsea fans were injured before the game amid clashes. The history between the two fan bases only amplified the situation. Memories resurfaced, especially from the 2011-2012 season, when violent confrontations between supporters left scars that were never fully healed. This was football carrying emotional weight, and it translated directly onto the pitch. Napoli played with desperation. Chelsea played with urgency. Every tackle mattered. Every decision carried consequence. Chelsea understood the stakes. Lose, and the entire season could collapse. A night that defines mentality. Under enormous pressure, Chelsea responded. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't comfortable, but it was resilient. In the final group stage match, their 8th, Chelsea edged Napoli 3-2, a result forged in chaos, stress, and determination. This was not a win built on beauty, it was built on survival, and that mattered more. Final day results and the table. Most teams won their final group stage matches, but wins alone were not enough. Positioning was everything. By the end of the night, the top 8 were confirmed. Arsenal, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, Tottenham, Barcelona, Chelsea, Sporting CP, Manchester City. These teams earned direct passage to the round of 16. One absence was striking. Real Madrid, despite spending much of the group stage inside the 8th place, dropped to 9th place on the final day, forced into the playoff round. That single shift captured the brutality of the group stage. In this Champions League, there were no guarantees. The final verdict on the group stage. This group stage was not chaotic by accident. It was demanding by design. It tested tactical intelligence, squad depth, emotional control, and adaptability. Those who passed progressed cleanly. Those who hesitated paid a price. History didn't disappear, but it lost its protection. The Champions League has entered a new phase, and the group stage proved it. This was not the warm-up. This was the warning. And from here on, the competition only gets more personal. Chapter 2. Arsenal, the standard. In the 2025-2026 UEFA Champions League group stage, Arsenal were not just another team collecting wins. That description is far too small. They were the benchmark, the reference point by which every other team in the group was measured. Teams didn't step onto the pitch asking, how do we beat Arsenal? They asked something far more revealing. How do we survive them? This was not an Arsenal side living off moments of chaos or the brilliance of one superstar. This was Arsenal as a system. Arsenal as control. Arsenal as decision makers. The kind of team that decides when a game is over, even before the final whistle. After 8 group stage matches, the message was unmistakable. In this Champions League, Arsenal were the standard. Plenty of teams qualify from the group stage. Some do it comfortably, but only a few leave the group phase having reshaped the way the competition sees them. Arsenal were one of those teams. They forced others to react to them rather than the other way around. Arsenal 2-0 Olympiacos. A mature win, a quiet warning. This was not a match designed for highlight reels. There were no wild score lines, no emotional explosions, but if you watched closely, this was one of the most important victories Arsenal recorded in the group. From the opening minutes, Arsenal chose calm over chaos. They understood exactly what Olympiacos wanted: intensity, emotion, mistakes forced by pressure. Arsenal refused to play that game. They slowed the tempo, circulated the ball patiently, and gradually drained the energy out of the contest. Defensively, they were immaculate. No cheap chances conceded, no panic moments. Every time possession was lost, it was recovered quickly. And when Arsenal had the ball, they weren't rushing toward goal. They were building control. The 2-0 scoreline might look routine, but it carried a clear message to the rest of the group. Arsenal were not just a dangerous attacking side. They were a team that knew how to kill a game. Arsenal 4-0 Atletico Madrid. The moment the standard was was announced. This was the night Arsenal spoke to Europe. Atletico Madrid are defined by defensive structure, resilience, and an ability to suffocate opponents. Many teams struggle to even create chances against them. Arsenal didn't struggle. They dismantled them. What stood out was not just pressing, but purposeful pressing. This wasn't running for the sake of intensity. Every movement had intent. Wherever Atletico tried to build, Arsenal were already waiting. Quick circulation, intelligent spacing, and sharp decision-making tore through Atletico's defensive block. When Atletico tried to slow the game down, Arsenal accelerated it. When Atletico tried to stay compact, Arsenal stretched them wide. The 4-0 victory was no accident. It was the result of a team fully aware of its identity. After this match, the rest of the group understood one thing clearly. Once Arsenal gained control, the match is already finished. Slavia Praha 0-3 Arsenal, a big team that travels. European away games are traps, hostile crowds, unfamiliar rhythms, pressure that breaks lesser sides. Many teams look dominant at home and uncertain on the road. Arsenal looked exactly the same. Slavia Praha tried to turn the game into a physical battle, hoping to disrupt Arsenal's rhythm. It didn't work. Arsenal refused to play that game. They slowed the tempo, circulated the ball patiently, and gradually drained the energy out of the contest. Defensively, they were immaculate. No cheap chances conceded, no panic moments. Every time possession was lost, it was recovered quickly. And when Arsenal had the ball, they weren't rushing toward goal. They were building control. The 2-0 scoreline might look routine, but it carried a clear message to the rest of the group. Arsenal were not just a dangerous attacking side. They were a team that knew how to kill a game. Arsenal 3-1 Bayern Munich, the test of reputation and maturity. Bayern Munich are not just another opponent. They are a measuring stick, a club with history, intimidation, and experience. Beating Bayern is never just about 3 points. It's a psychological statement. Arsenal showed no fear. When Bayern pressed, Arsenal stayed calm. When Bayern tried to raise the tempo, Arsenal absorbed it and responded on their own terms. They didn't need to dominate every minute. They simply needed to dominate the right moments. Every decision in the final third was ruthless. Chances were taken. Opportunities were punished. The 3-1 victory reflected a level of maturity Arsenal have been building toward for years. This was the night Arsenal moved from being an exciting team to being a respected European force. Club Brugge 0-3 Arsenal. A clean ending, no doubts. By the final group match, there was nothing left to prove, but Arsenal proved it anyway. From the first whistle, the game was one-directional. Possession was controlled, defensive lines were compact, attacks were efficient. Club Brugge never truly entered the contest. Arsenal treated the match with professionalism, not complacency. This was the perfect summary of their group stage campaign. No uncertainty, no drop in standards, no mental fatigue. Inter 1-3 Arsenal. True Champions League composure. San Siro is one of Europe's most demanding stages. History, atmosphere, pressure. It breaks teams. Arsenal walked into it knowing exactly who they were. When Inter scored, there was no panic, no identity shift. Arsenal continued executing their plan. That is the clearest sign of an elite team, responding to adversity without abandoning structure. When the opportunities came, Arsenal ended the game with authority, calm, precision, control. The 3-1 victory was not fortunate, it was deserved. Why Arsenal are the standard? After 8 matches, the picture is undeniable. Arsenal were not the loudest team, not the most emotional, but they were the most stable, structured, and decisive. They demonstrated that modern Champions League success is not about reputation alone, individual brilliance alone, or constant intensity. It's about knowing when to slow the game, when to accelerate it, and when to end it. Arsenal became the mirror other teams had to look into, and for any club dreaming of lifting the Champions League trophy, there is now one unavoidable question. Can you reach Arsenal's level?
Chapter 3. Bayern Munich. Power with a purpose. Bayern Munich were not a team surviving on history alone. This was not Bayern living off reputation, past trophies, or fear. This was Bayern with direction, a side built on power, structure, and an aggressive belief that every opponent could be overwhelmed. Across the group stage, Bayern consistently imposed themselves physically and tactically. They scored goals in volume, controlled territory, and dictated tempo. And while they were ultimately ultimately exposed once, most notably by Arsenal, that defeat did not erase the truth. It simply clarified it. Bayern Munich were powerful, but more importantly, they were powerful with purpose. Bayern Munich 3-1 Chelsea, a statement from the opening night. From the first whistle, this match felt one-sided, not just in scoreline, but in authority. Bayern immediately exposed the difference between a team ready for Champions League football and one still searching for cohesion. Chelsea were pressed relentlessly. Bayern's midfield controlled the rhythm, dictating when the game accelerated and when it slowed. Every duel felt weighted in Bayern's favor. This was not chaos, this was domination. The 3-1 win sent an early message to the group. Bayern were not here to feel their way into the competition, they were here to impose themselves. Pafos 1-5 Bayern Munich, a warning shot to the entire group. Some wins are more than 3 points. They are declarations. This was one of those nights. Even after establishing a clear lead, Bayern did not retreat. They did not manage the scoreline conservatively. Instead, they kept attacking, wave after wave, turning the match into a demonstration of superiority. 5 goals away from home is never accidental. It reflected a team driven not just by results, but by mentality. Bayern wanted the group to feel their presence, and they succeeded. This was the kind of performance that forces other teams to reconsider their ambitions. Bayern Munich 4-0 Club Brugge 22 October 2025. Total control, no resistance. This was Bayern at their most complete. Club Brugge were never allowed to settle. Possession, territory, and tempo all belonged to Bayern from start to finish. The gap in quality was obvious, not just in individual ability, but in organization. Bayern moved the ball with purpose, recovered it quickly, and suffocated any attempt at resistance. A 4-0 scoreline rarely flatters. In this case, it merely confirmed what was already clear. There are levels in the Champions League, and Bayern were operating on a higher one. PSG 1 Bayern Munich. Mental strength over star power. Paris Saint-Germain brought flair, talent, and individual brilliance. Bayern brought something more valuable: structure. Under pressure, Bayern did not panic. They absorbed PSG's momentum, waited for the game to tilt back in their favor, and then struck decisively. This was a victory rooted in patience and discipline rather than spectacle. The win reinforced a key theme of Bayern's campaign. When games become tense, Bayern do not rush, they wait. Arsenal 3-1 Bayern Munich. The flaw exposed. This was the match that revealed Bayern's vulnerability. Arsenal dismantled Bayern's pressing with intelligence and speed. By breaking the first line of pressure, Arsenal forced Bayern into defensive transitions they struggled to control. The result was a lesson in how even powerful systems can be undone. This defeat mattered, not because Bayern lost, but because how they lost. It showed that when their structure is disrupted, Bayern can be made uncomfortable. But great teams are defined not by invincibility, only by how they respond. Bayern Munich 3-1 Sporting CP. Immediate response. There was no hangover from the Arsenal defeat, no hesitation, no doubt. Bayern would turn to what they do best: calm control, aggressive attacking phases, and clinical finishing. This performance was about restoring authority and reasserting identity. The message was clear: one defeat does not derail Bayern Munich. Harry Kane was not just Bayern's top scorer, he was their attacking reference point. When the game became difficult, he provided stability. When chances appeared, he finished them. His 7 goals tell part of the story, but not the full one. His movement, link-up play, and presence gave Bayern a focal point in every phase of attack. He was the player Bayern trusted when the margin for error disappeared. Leonard Carl, 3 goals, but crucial. The numbers may not stand out, but the moments do. Carl scored when it mattered, goals that shifted momentum, broke resistance, or ended hope. He is not a headline maker, but he is indispensable. The kind of player managers rely on when matches tighten and clarity is required. Final verdict: Bayern Munich's group stage was a demonstration of controlled aggression. They combined physical dominance with tactical clarity and attacking intent. While Arsenal exposed their weaknesses, Bayern's overall campaign confirmed them as a serious European force. They are not flawless, but they are dangerous, and in the Champions League, power with purpose is always a threat.
Chapter 4. Teams you can never write off. Not every dangerous team looks perfect. Not every contender moves in straight lines. Some teams live in the chaos, unpredictable, unstable, but always capable of changing the entire competition in one night. Chelsea, Barcelona, and Paris Saint-Germain belong to that category. They are not always convincing. They are not always consistent, but they are never safe to ignore. Chelsea, inconsistent power, but always a threat. Chelsea were one of the most difficult teams to define in the 2025-2026 group stage. At times, they looked confused, uncertain in structure, unsure of rhythm. At other moments, they exploded with pace, intensity, and quality that overwhelmed opponents. That contradiction is Chelsea. Their defeats did not erase the truth. This squad is filled with speed, technical ability, and raw power. On their day, Chelsea can break any defensive line in Europe. The problem isn't talent, it is continuity. Chelsea are still a team under construction, but construction does not mean weakness. It means volatility, and volatility in the Champions League is dangerous. When confidence arrives, when structure settles, Chelsea become unpredictable, and unpredictability is often more threatening than control. Historically, Chelsea have never feared the later stages of this competition. They are comfortable in chaos. They survive pressure. They adapt. That is why Chelsea can never be ruled out, not because they are stable, but because they are capable of sudden transformation. Barcelona, beauty and danger in the same breath. Barcelona's 2025-2026 group stage had two faces. On one side, elegant possession, fluid movement, waves of attacks, and moments of complete control. On the other, missed chances, defensive lapses, and moments of vulnerability that kept opponents alive. But one thing never changed. Barcelona remain a team capable of destroying anyone when confidence and tempo align. Their losses were not signs of decline, they were lessons. Their biggest wins were reminders of what Barcelona become when the machine starts working. When rhythm is found, Barcelona don't just attack, they overwhelm. Criticism follows them everywhere. Expectations suffocate them. But even when doubts grow louder, Barcelona stay in the conversation, not because of nostalgia, but because their attacking ceiling remains terrifying. In the Champions League, teams like Barcelona do not disappear quietly. They resurface suddenly, and when they do, they arrive as a storm. PSG, when they believe, no one can stop them. Paris Saint-Germain are a team driven by emotion. When confidence is high, they are untouchable. When belief flows, their attacking force becomes ruthless. Their biggest group stage victories were proof of a forward line that shows no mercy when momentum is on their side. Yes, they lost matches, most notably against Bayern, but PSG defeats are not always indicators of weakness. Sometimes they are the result of a single lapse, one lost moment, one broken transition. The quality never disappears. The stars never stop being dangerous. Their attacking threat is permanent, even when control is not. PSG are feared because they do not need long dominance to decide matches. They need moments, and moments are enough to change the Champions League. That is why PSG can never be excluded from the conversation. Not because they are flawless, but because belief turns them into a weapon. Final thought. Chelsea, Barcelona, and PSG do not follow clean narratives. They frustrate, they confuse, they disappoint, and then suddenly remind everyone who they are. In the Champions League, consistency wins tournaments, but unpredictability ends dreams. And these are the teams no one ever wants to meet when the knockout stages begin. Chapter 5. The Premier League. When Europe arrives, they shift gears. This image tells a truth many people still refuse to fully accept. Premier League teams, even when they struggle domestically, become a different force in Europe. Look at the Champions League table. Look at the top 8 teams. The presence of the Premier League is not coincidence. It is not luck. It is the product of something deeper, something structural. The Premier League produces teams conditioned designed for chaos, pressure, and relentless competition. And when that environment is transferred to Europe, it becomes a weapon. Why the Premier League translates so well to Europe? 1. Relentless domestic competition. The Premier League has no pause button. There are no easy weeks, no guaranteed wins, no matches you can switch off mentally. Every opponent presses. Every stadium is hostile. Every game demands intensity. As a result, Premier League teams develop players conditioned to constant pressure, squads used to managing back-to-back high-stakes matches, mental resilience when games turn uncomfortable. So when an EPL side steps into Europe, the tempo often feels manageable. What feels extreme to others feels normal to them. 2. Physicality combined with speed. Many European teams rely on structure, rhythm, and technical control. The Premier League adds something else: sustained physical intensity, aggressive pressing, relentless pace over 90 minutes. The result? European opponents are often shocked by how quickly EPL teams attack, how aggressively they press without stopping, how little intensity drops late in matches. This is why Premier League sides often look stronger in Europe, not because they abandon technique, but because they layer it with brutality. 3. Squad depth as a strategic advantage. Premier League teams are not built around a starting 11 alone. They are built around 18 to 22 high-level players. When injuries hit, when schedules tighten, when rotations are required, the quality does not collapse. Sometimes, the substitute is more dangerous than the player coming off. In the Champions League, where fatigue decides seasons, this depth becomes decisive. 4. Winning mentality and European experience. Over the last decade, Premier League clubs have played European finals regularly, experienced extreme pressure environments, learned how to manage big moments. So even when EPL teams struggle domestically, Europe often becomes their reset stage, a competition where they rediscover clarity, focus, and identity. They know this territory. They understand the stakes. They thrive under the lights. The reality: the Premier League does not guarantee Champions League trophies, but it prepares teams better than any other league to survive the journey. That is why EPL clubs rarely collapse early. That is why they often peak late. And that is why every season Europe has to deal with the same truth. When Premier League teams arrive, they don't adapt to Europe. Europe adapts to them.